I feel like the problem is that people misunderstand fundamentally what the education system is for, right? Now, I'm basing this on the fact that right now it seems super hot to see memes about doing taxes. And to get like some kind of content being saying that we should have been taught how to do our taxes at school. Like, I think it's just because right now it's tax season, okay? So maybe this is an annual thing. People feel this feeling like, oh no, I'm adrift. What the heck am I going to do? Yeah, I should have learned these lessons, right? And it comes around often, but I don't know. There's something about this year that seems to be especially hot in this regard. And so it got me thinking about why people think that and what's the driving thought behind that. Again, it's just like it's tax season right now, and I can understand that people might feel like they're unequipped to do these forms, which, number one, I don't get, because when I say it's tax season, I mean in North America. Like, if you're in the UK, for the most part, it's kind of handled for you. So I don't feel like we even talk about this. Whereas I feel like, North America, certainly Canada, as far as I understand, America is exactly the same. I've never lived there. Never paid a single dollar in American tax. I'm proud of it. And it comes around, the year ends, and then we start getting fun letters and bills from our financial institutions, and other things start to ramp up, like robot calls. That's my favorite warning. The tax season, I should say, has started. Is random calls from robots being like, "Hey, the CRA, which is the Canadian Tax Authority, the CRA has your fucking number, and you are in arrears somehow, and we're coming to get you." And oftentimes that's a robot. Sometimes it's somebody with a script. They've from a call center. Spam, obviously, all of it's bollocks. Sorry to preface all of that. But they call you and they're like, you're in arrears, or you did something wrong, or what's the language? They're just like, oh, your SIN number, which is like your tax number, has been alerted. There's something against it. Like, I just love the idea that I mean, they must get someone, or else why do they still do this, right? Why do they still do these robot calls? Because they must get someone. But I just love the notion that this is based off, that just like the first warning you would get about you're going to prison, you're being arrested, tried, go to prison for your financial crimes, is a robot just calling you up and saying in a very stilted way, oh, your SIN number's been flagged, you haven't paid the right amount of money to your government official. And I used to listen to these robot messages for the comedy, because they would say, and you are at risk of going to jail. Like, as on the nose as that. And I think about, like, somebody wrote the script for that robot, someone programmed that robot to say that. If it's a person, same deal. And they say, oh, excuse me, sir. Yeah, turns out you're going to go to jail. I just love the notion that, in this premise, a government communication would include the words, you're going to go to jail. Like, it's a very sort of Looney Tunes kind of like cartoonish kind of threat to make. Like, oh, we're going to lock you up and throw away the key. It is fact. Of course it is factual. If you fuck up your taxes, that's the ultimate threat, right? But just to lay it down like that in those terms, and as I say, to receive it from a robot. So it's like, bleep blorb, sir, we will lock you up and throw away the key, is just really, really, really comedy. So the first time I heard it, I was terrified, because I was like, this plays into my fears of being a non-permanent resident in Canada, of being on a visa, not understanding this new system. I know that everybody's talking about doing their taxes right now. I know that I don't understand it. And then I get this robot call, spam number, and I hear this, excuse me, sir. We're going to arrest. And it's terrifying, because that's the fear that I had. I woke up every day that the feds were coming to knock down my door, deport me, take me away, destroy my life that I was enjoying. This played into that, and I'm sure it plays into that fear for many people who maybe are continuing to be in a sort of like non-official or less official than they would like immigrated status into Canada. But it is, if you just contemplate it for a moment, it's obviously preposterous that they love to send a letter, right? They love to send an email. There would be so much formally worded notice before you just got a phone call. And the best is when it comes at like 10 o'clock at night. And you're just, whatever, you're enjoying your evening and you get this robot call. And again, to try and take that seriously in that moment is really hard, because why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just contact you at a normal time? And also, why would they contact you at the time when you're supposed to be filling out your taxes? If you've been evading taxes since this time last year, you had 12 months to catch me. Like, I'm not Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, I've been in the same place the whole time. Just come and get me. There's not a paper trail that you have to chase down. You literally have my number. So why have you waited till this moment where I haven't given you my taxes for this season, right? And you're calling me up to be like, we're going to arrest you based on what you've done, assumedly last year. But it plays into a fear if you're an immigrant. It plays into a fear if you're a newer person to the system. But what's obvious to me now is that it plays into a fear that everybody has, which is that, like, if you don't do your taxes right, you will be locked up for good. And again, whether this is right to do or not, I base my understanding of the general vibe of the population, I base that on memes. And a crazy hot meme right now is, I wish I knew about taxes based on education. And the other really one is that format where it's like a sort of an imagined conversation spoken honestly between you and the tax authority, should that ever take place, right? Where it's like, it just highlights the ridiculousness of the fact that you're like, you have to fill it out, you have to do your own taxes, but they know how much you owe. And if you don't come to the same number, then you'll immediately be arrested and incarcerated and stripped of your worldly possessions, right? I just feel like that's super popular. I feel like I see that a lot. So again, it just, to me, that says, oh, there's a general vibe, there's a general fear about this possibility that we all kind of feel like we're fucking it up. And that is true. It is preposterous. Like, the system shouldn't work like that. And especially in North America, I feel like the first time I realized that that's how it goes down. Where again, if you're in the UK, and you're on a salary, it just gets sorted out for you. That makes sense. Because again, they know the numbers, so you don't have to do the numbers, so whatever. And so the first time you do it is preposterous. However, I still feel like there's a little bit of a vibe of, even in England, of like, well, they should have taught us this at school. They should have taught us taxes at school. And I remember, in fact, when I got my, when I first moved into my first rented place that like wasn't my parents' house. I didn't pay rent or whatever there. I lived with those guys. That's how it works usually. So when I moved to university, I moved into like university accommodation, right? First year, all good. Everybody knows that. And then second year, you move into, or we moved into rented accommodation. There was a group of 6 of us. We found a place in the city, like halfway between uni and the city. Amazing. And rented it out. That's generally the vibe. And our landlord was a guy who was like, I don't know, middle-aged, ? To us, he obviously seemed ancient because we were children, so difficult to age him, but middle-aged. That's all you need to know. And I just remember this really specific moment where he asked us to fill out for whatever, like a deposit or first month's rent or something like this. He asked us to fill out checks. And for some reason, this was happening in person and we weren't expecting to do it, or like we'd bought our checkbooks but like didn't expect it to happen then or something like this. And he just said, I just remember him saying, because he asked us to fill out a check and none of us knew how to do it. And I just remember him saying, what are they teaching you in schools? And I just thought, maybe I even said it because I was a lot more cocky then, if you can imagine. I just thought, not this, you dumbass. Why would they teach this? Why would they teach signing and writing a check? What would that lesson look like? Like, how would they fit that into the curriculum? Same with taxes. What would that lesson look like? What would be the basis of that? Who would teach that? What would be the way that they would accredit that? How would they exam that? Like, how would that work? And excuse me, middle-aged man, just to be clear, did you learn check writing at school? 1, I don't believe you. I just don't believe that you did. 2, if you did, well, I mean, I guess then what happened? Why did they stop? And 2, if you did, why? What weren't you learning that you were learning check writing? Like, again, I just straight up don't believe you. But if we're on to part 2 of that, the other side of that coin, which is, I believe you somehow. I believe that what you're saying is true, that you learnt to write a check out while you were in formal education. What did that lesson look like? How were you examined on that? Who was the teacher? And how long did it take? And why didn't you learn it outside of school? The reason we didn't learn it outside of school is because checks don't fucking matter anymore. Nobody writes checks, okay? It's a very specific situation in which you write a check. And also, learning to write a check takes no time at all. So you learn it once. Outside of a formal education scenario, you never have to learn again. Like, it's not like it's an annual lesson plan scenario, right? So you've just met us, landlord, at a moment in our lives, because of the cultural divide between us. We haven't learned that, you have. So now this is a teachable moment. And then we'll never need to be taught again because it's so goddamn simple and straightforward. But it just so happens that at the moment of meeting us this afternoon, we didn't know. Now at the end of this interaction, we know. It doesn't seem like, based on the ease of that transaction and the ease of acquiring that knowledge, it just doesn't seem like that should make its way into the British curriculum. And the same applies to taxes, right? Like, I'm not saying that it's easy as writing a check, obviously. Lots more complexity to it, lots more going on, lots more moving parts. But what I'm trying to say is it's a lesson that you learn once, or it's a bunch of skills that you learn and you apply at the same time as you're learning, and then that's it. You're good. Like, you do the same shit next year. If the process has changed slightly, the process has changed slightly, but there's like ways of finding out what that is. And if you fucking forget, then the great thing is that everybody you know around you is doing them and can do it with you. It's not like you're in a like, oh fuck situation where you're totally abandoned and you have to just work it out by yourself. And you never have to work it out by yourself, because especially now, there's more and more systems that like simplify it for you, and it's just like simple this and quick that, and you just tippity tap in whatever. And then again, the financial institutions send you pieces of paper. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying that the pieces are put in place for you to do it when it's relevant to you, and the resources available when it's relevant to you. So what would be the point of learning it at school? And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, the purpose of education is not to G you up to fill out forms 20 years in the future. Like, if we had a lesson at school about filling in taxes, there would be more questions than answers. None of us has ever had a job. My job was like, my first job while I was at school was like dropping leaflets through people's doors. I needed education in how to calm down people who didn't want spam mail through their doors. Like, I didn't need education in how to work out if that was taxable income. Like, all of us are single. All of us don't have dependents. So like, what would we do? Go through this form and understand what all of that stuff is when absolutely none of it applies to us? It's just crazy to like throw that idea out, like, oh, they should have taught us that at school. Like, what would it have meant to us? Absolutely nothing. And it would have been as more mystifying and weird and obscure then than it was now. Like, I can maybe understand the idea of like, oh, here's a general primer of understanding how fucking bureaucracy is a shit show, and filling out forms is takes a certain mentality. That, sure, great, but like just the idea of like, oh, school should have taught me how to do taxes. That's the issue that I'm having here, and that's the issue that I'm fighting against. Not least because like, oh, chill, okay, all good. We taught you taxes at school today. Oh, you think you're gonna remember that? You think you're gonna keep that with you? You think that's it? You do one lesson, maybe you do an annual lesson on taxes, and then that's locked away? Not a friggin' chance, bro. Like people don't remember the difference between the theirs. People don't. I see more examples of the wrong use of single or double O2 on a daily basis with English goddamn speakers that shows me that education, like being hammered into you, does nothing for retention of information. Okay? Like, people don't understand basic physics, science, basic maths. Like, so the notion that like, if they taught us how to work out our deductibles, then I would have locked that away and I would have been rock solid for life, is obviously just bollocks. To tell me honestly that the things you learnt at school have stayed with you in such a crystalline fashion that you can recall them now, apply them now. And I'll show you a million other examples of, misspelling and misunderstanding. Like, people are flat earthers, dude. Like, we all learn about how the globe works, and people are flat earthers now. And you're trying to tell me that if we had a primer on government forms, we'd all be locking that away? Nah. It's preposterous. It's just, I just can't get on board with it. The other argument people make is, again, I understand that memes are funny, but I'm taking personal offense. That's the basis of what we're doing here as we sit here, okay? When they say like, oh, I don't know how to fill out my taxes, but I know about Pythagoras, for example. Oh, I know the square root of, oh, I can find X in this situation. Yeah, you do. Are you actually complaining that you understand the core underlying physical principles of the universe and the world in which you exist and move around? Are you actually complaining that you have an understanding of those versus, oh, I wish I knew how the goddamn bureaucracy worked. I wish I could file my taxes in 5 minutes instead of 25. Oh, that's what you wish you had? Rather than an understanding like the water cycle of the planet, what gave you life. Rather than understanding the miracle of existence, you'd rather be better at literally ticking a box. I'm sorry. I'm on the other side of that trade-off. I'm glad that we learn all these wild, far-reaching concepts. I'm glad we read like Of Mice and Men rather than understand like, well, if you want to apply for your passport, then it's got to happen this way. I'm glad I learned about Greek civilization rather than learn how to write a check. Like, education is not about the practical application in the mundanity of the society of which you exist. Education is about being like, hey, bro, you're not the only person here. There's actually like 8 billion of us at the moment, and this is going to really blow your mind, but there's been a few before then. They did a whole bunch of stuff, and they did it all upon this rock, and this rock's floating around in endless nothingness around a ball of fiery gas. If you want a little primer on that, we got you. And if you want to learn the building blocks of learning about that so that you can continue to learn more and leave this institution with an open, curious mind, further exploring yourself and the world around you, we got you. Whereas for some reason, people have got it in their head that it should just be this tick box of, here's how you do this form. Here's how you follow this law. Like, you think they should be teaching us like what? How to drive cars? How to buy items at the store? How to cook? I mean, they do teach us how to cook, so immediately regret bringing that up. They've just brought food tech back into English schools, so that's obviously my mistake. I understand that there are vocational subjects. I understand that they have massive application, obviously. There's many, but education is not about that. Education is about like formalizing how you see the world and showing you that there's even more than what you understand, and that if you understand this little bit and how it kind of fits together, then maybe you can go out from that and put more and more Lego pieces of this chaotic existence together. So maybe you can get a handle on whatever. And then maybe at some point you say, hey, this Lego piece, I'm really interested in that. And maybe that's the kind of piece that I want to be. You get taught about religions, not so that you can just know religions or you can turn up to church at the right time, but so that you can understand that you're not the first human person any person in history to say like, hey, why do things happen? A bunch of people thought about that. And a bunch of people are thinking about that right now. And a bunch of people came up with a bunch of different ideas. So you're learning that humans do crazy things, and the context in which they do them is itself crazy. But if you just come at it from a place of understanding, then there can be achieved further understanding. It's not about saying, oh, life is a series of trivia questions and we're here to prime you with the answers. So it really upsets me that that's what it comes down to, seemingly, for a bunch of people. I even remember, like at some point in education, like you start choosing the subjects that you want to learn, right? You're in the top end and you just get taught whatever, and it is crazy abstract, and you're just like learning how to read and what numbers are, right? And then you get more and more specific. Again, like you're always building on the building blocks of like what you learnt before, and the idea is that you leave and go on, and whether you go into higher education or you go into work, you're always building your understanding. And so at some point, you kind of turn the tide and you choose what you're going to learn. So as you go into 17, 18, when, that last period of like secondary school, I remember I wanted to be an architect. And so I chose engineering and architecture related subjects, namely physics, design and technology. And then I chose maths, and here's the real kicker, further maths, which is just hardcore fucking maths. Maths taken all the way to the next level, right? And so there are several schools of math, right? And there's like really applied stuff like, applied mathematics. You have like engineering, you have like physics, you have things like statistics, you have things like decision maths. Actually, that's not that applied, but whatever. And then you have, on the other side, you have what's called pure mathematics. That's the crazy shit. That's the shit that is just like, I hate this phrase, but maths on steroids, maths on drugs, maths that's just like, yo, what if we did this though? It's where you get the idea of like irrational numbers. Imaginary numbers. Irrational numbers definitely come into it, but they also have an application. Just crazy concepts that are like, oh, what if we just think about math in this really abstract way, take it to the next level and the next level beyond that, and then an abstract level that we haven't currently thought about. And there was this fucking dude who throughout school just loved to put his hand up and be like, hey, why are we learning this? Like, what application does this have? And it's that same mentality, like I say, of like, well, because we're learning to learn, like we're learning to expand our minds. We're not learning to apply every single goddamn thing that we do, or else school would be super sure and we'd all come out dumb, but able to fill out a government form and our trousers wouldn't fall down. But he loved to put his hand up and say this. Oh, why are we learning this? Okay. And that's maybe makes sense when you're in a certain number of classes. Like when geography wanders off a little bit, you're like, why are we learning this? If it's not on the test, it's boring, doesn't have an application. Why are we learning this? Okay? Fair question. This guy chose, just like I did, to do maths and further maths. So just like I did, he was taking applied mathematics and pure mathematics. He was taking the most abstract form of math education that exists. There is no application. It's right there in the title. It doesn't have an application beyond itself. Application is found after the abstract nature of it. And this guy would raise his hand and say, but why are we learning this? If you're asking that, then you don't realize what an idiot you're making of yourself. Because if you're asking why we're learning something abstract in the most abstract subject on the curriculum, then you're the idiot, bro. You smarmy little twonk. You've put up your hand to act like you know what's up, but you're the idiot, dude. So I I wonder where he's at now. I wonder if, I wonder if he is applying any of that stuff. That would make me laugh, number one. But I wonder if he just like applies that rule, going forward. Like, oh no, I'd never watch a documentary on solving a murder because I'm never going to be a policeman myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so ridiculous to say, especially at the arrogant age of 17, to be like, oh, this will never have application in my life, so therefore I'll never learn it. Because you just don't know. And the point is that, again, the point of education is it lights the flame so that the fire grows. It doesn't give you the answer so you can lock it away and whip it out as and when. And just the idea of him choosing this for himself and still asking, well, what is it? Why? What's the relevance? It's just so preposterous to me. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if he has a very literal job now, that has nothing to do with maths. And he feels that his education was wasted. And like I say, I understand that taxes are hard. Okay? Not trying to argue on that. And I'm sure, given the weakness of sex education and the failure to understand, political discourse, schools can do a lot better, maybe, you could argue, to prepare us for outside life. But to me, that's not the point. Education is not prepare you for the mundanity of living life as an adult in this system. There's a purer ideal there that I'm just trying to argue for. And I think it's somebody else's goddamn job to teach you about taxes. Or indeed, that shit should be simple or well-resourced enough that you don't have to be taught or you don't have to learn. You don't have to retain that information. The system should be improved. And who are the only people that improve the system? Well-educated individuals who learn more than how to fill out the existing forms that are there in the moment that they are in the education system. Like, there's a bigger thing at play here. We don't spend like 15, 18 longer years in education just so we can, know what the right thing to do is when our neighbor's fence is too tall. It's not about learning how to follow the law, how to communicate with government. It's about something bigger than that. I think people have lost sight of that, maybe. And maybe that in itself is a failure of the education system. If people don't understand why they're being educated. But goddamn, kids hate school as it is. Kids are bored at school. Can you imagine how bored you'd be if what you were learning about was doing your taxes, was writing checks, was how to open a bank account? Can you imagine if that's what school was? And again, I just think about this landlord and him saying, what are they teaching you at school nowadays? And my thought was, like I said, well, not how to write checks. And I imagined his education. I'm thinking, if that's what your schooling was, they taught you how to write checks and nothing else. I mean, you didn't know the shit that I got taught. You know, I'm sure we learned wildly different shit about the planets because we just knew different stuff. So I'm sure, and there's better teaching techniques, and there's probably less corporal punishment. So I would imagine, in fact, that my schooling was far more engaging, exciting, and educational than yours. Especially, bro, if what they were teaching you to do was how to write checks. You know, I think the pity's going the wrong way here, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm glad that I have no idea how small government works. But I got to set things on fire with a Bunsen burner, you know? I'm happy that that's the way the balance is skewed. I'm happy that I spent time in an art room fucking around with sculpture rather than learning how to exist in the structure that we've already defined. You know, and I think people feel lost when it comes up against these trivial things, but they should realize that's because it's smaller than them, not because it's bigger than them. They've learned to do more than that. They're smarter than taxes. That's why it sucks. It sucks to fill out a form. It sucks to move numbers from the left column to the right column. It's boring computational stuff that we shouldn't be doing. It's beneath us on a person-to-person level. And if we've gone through education, then it is literally beneath us and our understanding. Taxes are stressful, forms are annoying because they're lower than us. We're better than them. And that's why we don't like them. Not because they're more complicated than we can understand. Because it's stupid, trivial work that we shouldn't need to understand. We have other things to think about, like art and music and how people interrelate. And that's what we developed at school, is the love and the appreciation and the understanding of that. And that's what I think the problem is. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you've been listening so far, I really, really, really appreciate it. I'm going to keep it up. New episode coming every week. If you like what you're hearing, put a like behind it, you know. Let's make the algorithm work for us. There's a like button down there. There's a subscribe button if that's what you do. And if you don't do either of those things, tell your friends, send them this address, send them your favorite episode, and I promise you there'll be an even better one next week. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.